But I will tell you this, what if communications were down? Then what? That would have brought a whole nother element into this thing where we would not know what was going on. We would not know what the state is doing to support the local communities. We would not know what the local communities are doing. So I feel blessed that we have this opportunity to exercise this drill, this catastrophic event drill. And I think we can have some great learning opportunities from this. And what can we do better? Mr. Dyson, you asked me last night from the 50,000-foot view, what can we do better? We can better enable and staff up a robust emergency management system locally in the local communities. A lot of the local emergency managers are a staff of one, and it's other duties as assigned. So build a robust emergency management system. We, as I said, communications were up and operational. We've talked for decades on interoperable communications. Well, what we've learned in Puerto Rico and the catastrophic hurricanes that we've learned is what happened to operable communications. It would be great if they would all talk to each other, but how about if they would just operate when things go bad on a regular basis? So I think looking at good mitigation for communications and making operable comms a top priority is critical. Great programs that the federal government supports the state to provide for the local communities, such as Be the Help Until Help Arrives. The citizens are truly the first responders. And we need to enable those citizens to give them the tools to understand what they're going to be up against so they can better prepare themselves and their families and their neighbors and their neighborhoods to take care of themselves for an extended period of time. Because the more that those individuals and those neighborhoods can take care of themselves, the local, the state, and if necessary, the federal response can assist those that really, truly need it. Building codes. And I will say this all day long. We've had a great understanding of improved building codes here in Anchorage. We need to have a statewide building code system in place that is withstandable to these types of seismic events. It is not a statewide component, but they need to be put in place. They need to be extended out. If it's a city ordinance, a municipal ordinance, it needs to be extended out to all of the areas of responsibility for those, for the municipalities and the boroughs. We need good building codes. They work. Okay.
Hey Mike.
Yes, sir.
I'm over here behind you. So I'm Alex Slifka. I'm the Chief Fiscal Officer tasked with. Thank you very much. The team did a great job. I think what we'd like to spend some time on today is what I think people really care about is how do I get paid to get my money back?
Yeah, I was good.
Get my house back.
I got it. I got on my soapbox.
So I do have a question. I know we've talked earlier about there's an individual assessment that's going to start on Monday. You've said you've got 1,200 calls. Do you have the data right now so that your team can do that individual assessment, or are you still looking for additional data either from the state or from the municipality?
So the state is conducting the assessments. My teams that are in place are assisting them, so we're not duplicating multiple assessments for the public buildings and individual homes. Do we have the data right now? I think it's being compiled as we speak, because we're not only looking at the municipality, we're also looking at the Mat-Su Borough, the Kenai as well, because it's going to be a statewide request coming from the governor. So we've got to take the components from all of the elements of the impacted areas and allow the state to have some time to put together that package for a request. So I'll let Mike and his team answer that further, but I will assure you that our teams are, as Mike said, working together to get that information from those impacted areas as quickly as possible. But it's going to take some time. Sure.
If you like. So this is Sam Walton. I'm the program manager for disaster assistance. That's already been described as covering both individual assistance and public assistance. The answer to your question is basically yes, we are still collecting information. No, we don't have it all. So all disasters are local. If you think of the organization of how disasters are responded to, if you think of an upside-down wedding cake, then that makes it a little bit more graphic. The local is the bottom, and then you go up from there. So we have, in the case of this, we have Kenai Peninsula Borough, we have the municipality of Anchorage, and we have Matsu. Those would be the lower layers of the cake. Coordination was going on between their EOCs and our state EOC as this thing kicked off. What we depend on from those local affected jurisdictions is the information that they can collect that helps us understand where the concentrations of damage and the types of damage are. Normally we collect that from those local EOCs. This thing moved along so quickly that from Friday to Monday, that by Tuesday we had our state assistance program turned on and our hotline turned on and our online application process. Those applications end up in a database that allows us to map where the addresses from the applications are. But that usually comes a little later. The typical method is we would collect that information from the EOCs. So we are still looking for information, and we've coordinated with the EOCs and the representatives of those EOCs to begin to help us get broad pictures of the numbers and the concentrations and the types of damage. We're still working on that. The application piece is a very detailed component of our program, and anybody that has filled out an application knows how that works. It takes a little while to get it completed, but once that application is in our database, then we can map it. Our plan is to try to have between efforts from the local jurisdictions and our application collection process enough information to map out where we need to send those teams for individual assistance beginning Monday. We will still be collecting information that will go on for some time. The application period is 60 days. So as that comes in, we will continue to process those locations and continue to process the places where we need to go to do inspections. Our individual assistance program requires pretty good verification on damages. So people can expect to get a visit if they have filed an application. The federal program is basically the same way. So you can imagine, this morning we were pushing 1,800 applications. There's probably some duplications in there. It will take some time to process that. Our priority is to work with applications that we see and that we have gotten for folks that have houses, homes, primary residences that are severely damaged and unlivable in their opinion. We are prioritizing those applications. Folks that just had things broken, those applications are in the system, and we will get to those as we can, but we are prioritizing those that appear to be homes that are unlivable. So we've got some public messaging going out on that to bear with us as we work through that priority.
So hey, I'm going to interrupt you for a second and ask some practical questions about the individual disaster assistance program, okay? So we have a document, and it's all available here at the front as well, that says to go to ready.alaska.gov or call 1-855-445-7131. So the deadline to apply is January 29, 2019. Now that's for the state program. Is there can you also apply for the federal program at that website, or is there a different place to apply? And do you have to do actually two applications, or does one application apply to both programs?
That's a very good question.
Thank you.
And unfortunately, the answer is yes. So both programs will require an application. That will be out in public messaging. We deal with this frequently. We haven't really had to do that in the Anchorage area, but across other parts of our state, we have had both federal and state individual assistance disasters. And we deploy our state program first. And then if there is a federal IA declaration, if that gets approved, then FEMA will also do messaging as well as the state on how to apply for the federal program as well.
So right now, you can only apply for the state program at ready.alaska.gov, correct?
That's correct.
And we don't know yet where, or do we know now where people will apply for the federal program once it's available, if it's available?
The application process for FEMA's IA is very similar in that you can call in or hit a website, and that will all be announced at the time that we have a federal declaration.
Okay. So a couple other practical questions on this. For both the federal and state program, but I understand most of your answers will be mostly about the state program right now, but for individual assistance, what is eligible to be reimbursed? how much can a person get maximum, and how long will it take for them to get their money?
Okay, three very good questions. I want to emphasize that each application is reviewed and adjudicated individually. So I can talk in general terms, but for every rule, there's many different different elements that go into that. But generally speaking, the cost of repair for direct damage from an event that falls under the declaration, so structural damage can be eligible. Certain personal property items can be eligible. Generally speaking, if you consider the things that a family would consider essential, those types of items are going to be eligible for consideration under the IA program. What we do is we take the application, we inventory what's on the application for what's been damaged, then we verify that, and then there is a dollar amount that goes along with each of those essential items, and that becomes a total amount that goes into the, we call it an award, that gets processed for the individual. Not everything that gets damaged or lost will be considered an essential item. Mainly you think about what a family would need, the things to cook on, the things to wear, certain furnishings. This applies to the personal property side. On the residential side, it's the essential areas of a home. So bedroom, bathroom, kitchen, generally speaking, not family rooms, not garages. But again, each application is reviewed individually, and after the award is determined and the applicant is notified of what that award is and what was comprised of that award, then they're also notified on the procedures where they can appeal that decision or provide additional information. But that's how it begins.
So I have a quick follow-up, and then we'll go to Mr. Dyson. So actually, and I apologize if you said this and I missed it. So what is typically the maximum amount an individual can receive, and what is the typical time frame for how long it takes to adjudicate and receive the funding?
Okay, so you didn't miss it. I hadn't got to that yet.
Okay.
So we try to begin to process payments within 30 days of us opening our hotline. That's a goal. We generally hit it.
And I'm sorry, let me interrupt. When you say us, you're talking about the state
Team.
or the feds? Okay. So we want to keep making that point.
The State of Alaska Disaster Assistance Team, which is comprised of both specialists in individual assistance and public assistance, are all basically right now concentrating on individual assistance. So we've got this large group of applications in. We're processing those applications. We're prioritizing those that involve homes that are not livable, so we can get into the temporary housing program, and then we'll get into the pieces parts that are broken. Our goal is to try to get a payment process within 30 days of opening the hotline. Those will be prioritized to what I just mentioned, the homes that are unlivable. So that would be the earliest. The longest could be out to 12 months or so. It just depends on how long it takes to get through all the applications. This is for a state disaster only. By statute, the state program is limited to 50% of the federal program. We didn't put a number in there because that way we don't have to change it when FEMA changes their number. The maximum grant under the individual family grant program is $17,450. That's the max. That
Under the federal or state?
State.
Okay, so the federal is twice that then?
Federal is twice that.
Okay.
Up to that amount based on the reported damages and the process of verification of what those damages are.
And can an individual apply for both and so potentially get $35,000 from the feds and another $17,000 something from the
Another
state?
very good question. It doesn't work that way exactly. There is a provision with the federal program that does not allow for duplication. So if we pay out, if for instance, if somebody's total loss, verified loss, is $30,000, and so that would be a max grant under the state program, and then the federal IA program were to get declared, and the FEMA verifiers come in and go through their process, and they've reached the same $30,000 number, then they're going to look at what the state has already paid out and reduce their payout by what the state has already paid.
And if it damages 60,000, you're still capped at 35, is that what you're saying? So 35 is the most you could get through these programs?
If the state has paid out and the federal has paid out, then they're going to max out at that amount.
Yeah. Mr. Dyson had a question?
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate the triage that you have in place for rating, the loss that a homeowner has gotten. I assume that there's some finite total amount of money available, and so if you have lots of homeowners that get to the highest priority of their needs, and there's a finite amount of money, then does it come to a first come, first served?
I'm going to let our director speak to that. So far, we've not had that issue. That gets back to the legislature and financing and the financial plan that gets put together at that level. But there's no, we don't have a financial technical cap on disasters.
Okay, that answers my question. Thank you.
The state does have a disaster relief fund that's forward funded by our legislature. Should this disaster, and it most likely will go through the money that we currently have, we go back to the legislature and ask for, based on all of the assessments that we have done, for them to up that disaster relief fund with that money. As the federal government comes in, the federal program, most of the money typically goes to the public assistance programs, the repairing of public infrastructure. But we would and the federal government pays 75% of those damages, and the state is responsible for the 25%. Again, this is the public assistance program. We work in concert much closer with FEMA on the public assistance program than we do individual assistance program. When, just for everyone's information, when myself and my team are talking, we are addressing only the state program. I'm going to let Administrator O'Hare talk to the federal program. And again, the federal programs for public assistance and individual assistance have not even been requested yet by the state. That's a process that we're working through right now, and the damage assessments that we're doing, both individual and public assistance, those are ongoing in the next few weeks. So we don't know that we will be getting an individual assistance declaration. The criteria for that I'll allow the administrator to talk to, but based on the damages that we are aware of in the public assistance side, it is highly likely, and again, nothing's 100%, but highly likely that the federal government will declare a major disaster with public assistance. So all the public damage to public infrastructure will be paid 75% by the federal government, 25% state. Does that answer some questions?
Yeah, very, very well. But just to follow up, is there anybody here from DOT?
Some look like.
So
Okay.
if I could throw a shout out to DOT, as we all know, the amount of time it took to get those roads repaired up and running, and out by Mirror Lake, even striped and painted in the winter time is an incredible job. As Director Sutton said, the federal public assistance program is being worked through, and we're understanding of the costs associated with emergency protective measures, as well as those repairs and estimates for roads for roads and public buildings. Those roads, though, the highways that we've seen, we also look at what other funding mechanisms are used, the federal highway dollars. Those don't come into play. So if those road repairs for the highway, for the Glen Highway and the Stewart Highway, are under federal highways, it doesn't come into play for a federal declaration. The feds don't reimburse themselves.
I'm sorry, Mike. We have a question from Ms.
Sure.
Quinn Davidson.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Thanks for being here. This is really helpful. So I have sort of a two-part question. How does earthquake insurance, for those who have it, play into this? I assume, like the federal state evaluation, you can't get compensated beyond what your need is, but earthquake insurance might take quite a while to evaluate. So how does that work timing-wise? And then the second part is, if someone doesn't have earthquake insurance and has damage over the $35K max, is that it, or are there other sources of relief as well?
I'll take it. Sure, Mr. Chairman, thank you for the question. I appreciate it. So earthquake insurance, if you have earthquake insurance, and the good thing about earthquake insurance, deductibles aside, you can call your insurance company up right away and get an assessor out pretty darn quick to get an understanding of the potential costs associated that you're talking about for your loss. Now let's talk about the earthquake deductibles. Earthquake insurance here up in Alaska, some programs, some insurance companies have products that have a 10% deductible of the home's value. So if your home is worth $400,000, a 10% deductible is $40,000. And the state IA program could be used as a component for that deductible. Correct me if I'm wrong, Director. Also, if the assessments to the disaster for public assistance and individual assistance, and an individual assistance declaration cannot be made, there may be other opportunities for those that either don't have enough insurance, earthquake insurance, or don't have earthquake insurance at all. The state can also request a Small Business Administration to come up with a small interest loan to cover the up to Lifeline? About $200,000 of a low interest loan. Don't hold me to this, but it's about $200,000 small business loan to either cover up to that loss or cover additional deductible if it's a 40 or 50% deductible. Yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, so just a quick follow-up. So that's a loan. You can only actually get money up to $35,000. And did I hear you correctly that you can use that to apply to your deductible if you have earthquake insurance?
Mike?
Let me see if I can clarify. The state program pays up to half of the federal, let's just say 17 for round figures. And the federal program will not duplicate. We're talking individual assistance here. The federal program will not duplicate and double pay for things that the state program has already paid for. But those programs work independently other than the fact of duplication, and they can be cumulative. So you could get up to 17 from the state and up to 34 from the federal.
Okay.
And that's about 50.
Okay.
Right?
So that was
ballpark figures.
So that was a
No,
mistake.
I'm sorry.
Mike,
Right.
that's not
So,
correct.
so
not correct?
yeah. So, thanks.
Okay. Appreciate
Sorry,
that.
no, you got it. So, yeah, we're here for expectation management,
Right.
so let's talk about it. So, the state's program is about $17,000. So, the max that the federal government would offer, would be that max $34,000. So, it'd be
Okay.
the max someone could get could be $34,000.
Okay.
So, but I want to set some expectations.
Thank you for that clarification of the program.
So, with all of the disasters, the hurricanes, as an example, the hurricanes last year, with the average of the federal IA program that could be paid out max grant, and those that had flood insurance and wind and hail insurance coverage, the average payout for the federal IA program was about $6,000. Okay?
6?
Yes, sir.
6.
I will tell you this, Mr. Dyson, about Alaska. The state of Alaska is one of the few states in the nation that's blessed with its own fully funded IA programs. The beauty is they can pay out relatively quickly to help folks not get back to normal, get back up on one knee and at least start getting repairs going, while other potential programs can be brought to bear. They are not insurance policies. And so, this is a disaster. This is a travesty to some folks.
Yeah.
We've seen some of the disasters, some of the homes that were affected around the town. Those are critical elements. What the federal government looks for, and I've got my subject matter experts out here to steer me in the right direction. What FEMA looks at as we assess these individual homes that are affected, we look at major damages. We look at major widespread damages, and we look at those components from the statewide, from those communities that are affected, in order to try and execute programs, if they are executable. If they're not, one of our other jobs in emergency management, all of us, is to try and bring together those other partners that can provide other assets. The faith-based organizations, the non-governmental organizations, to provide other needs, construction and repair. We have done, Alaska has done miracles with voluntary organizations active in disasters to assist those impacted by catastrophe, to help them repair, to help them rebuild. So looking at the whole picture, the whole patchwork, if you will, of where are the gaps and how can they be filled under what programs. Could be, from a federal standpoint, it could be HUD programs as well to be involved. But we've got to understand the total impact, understand what programs can be executed, and then try and use all of our partners together to fill those gaps to get folks back to some semblance of normalcy. But
Thank you.
Again, they're not to make folks whole, sir.
Thank you, Mike. So I want to recognize for the record we've been joined by Mr. Eric Croft. Mr. Slifka has a question, and then I would actually like, I don't know if, Austin, you want to get back in the queue to ask a follow-up, but then I'd also like to open it up to members of the public. If there are members of the public who are here who have a specific question, you can use this microphone right here, and if you guys want to queue up, that would be great. But for now, we'll go to Mr. Slifka. Do you have a question?
Yes, so I just want to confirm with Mr. O'Hara, our understanding, an application has to be filed by the governor with FEMA within 30 days to get a declaration of assistance. You're going to conduct a preliminary damage assessment on Monday, the 10th, for the individual assistance program, followed on Monday, the 17th, for the public assistance program, which is the municipality and state assets. You're asking, I believe, the municipality to mobilize its staff in order to assist your staff in the conducting of these preliminary damage assessments. Do I understand that correctly?
Yes, sir. This is an all-hands-on-deck operation. So the locally driven, state-supported, and managed, and federally supported as well. We do this as a team.
Okay, and so then, as we've talked before, we are working with the state to gather the information that they have gotten because they've received most of the requests for damage, and so they know much more than the municipality does what the extent and location of the damage. I guess the question is, if we're going to mobilize a couple hundred people to help with this assessment, when it comes time, hopefully, that we get FEMA assistance, does FEMA pay for that assessment?
Assistance. I'm calling for a lifeline, sir. Go ahead, Lisa Davidson.
Lisa Davidson, I'm with FEMA's Individual Assistance Program.
Can you come down and use a microphone since
Thanks.
we're going over TV?
Hi, good afternoon. Lisa Davidson with FEMA's Individual Assistance Program. So what we would want you to do is make sure you work with your staff to collect information about the hours that they're using. And just to scope it out, we're coordinating with the state. We're really looking at staffing 4 teams. So it is not, don't worry too much just yet, and we'll work out with you all on mobilizing how many people we need and what we are looking for. As you do with public assistance, you want to make sure that you're recording the hours worked, the tasks that you're doing. Those costs are, again, potentially reimbursable later down the road. And I can't speak to the state program, but that would be pending the approval of a federal declaration. So just make sure, again, document stuff now, but we'll be available to support you all, working with the state primarily.
Thanks, Lisa.
And
Okay,
one
so-
final
I'm sorry.
follow-up question, actually, from Mr. O'Hara. So, as we're doing work, and the state's doing work, and the municipality's doing work, is there a specific federal procurement guidelines that we should be looking at?
So I would submit, and the state can correct me, the state has very stringent procurement guidelines as well, and we have worked very well with the state on other procurements. So the state is well aware of the federal procurement requirements. I believe we're in sync with each other. I don't think there'll be any differentiation. Correct me if I'm wrong, Sam?
So first and foremost, what the state and FEMA are going to look at is that you comply with your own procurement policies. Sometimes there are additional emergency powers that are in effect when a local declaration is executed. So the answer to your question is yes, follow your own policies first, follow your emergency powers, and then follow state procurement policy. Generally, our state procurement policy is more stringent than the federal. But I want to just go back to your previous question. In the local effort for gathering information for individual assistance, that is not reimbursable. That will be out of the Muni's pocket. That we're not anticipating a large workforce from the Muni. We've been in contact with them already for the type of information we're looking for. And then when the teams go out, as already been mentioned, we're looking at the possibility of 4 teams. Neither the state nor FEMA are experts in all the areas of the municipality, so we're looking at for locals to help us get around to see where the biggest damage, the most complicated damage is, and also for FEMA to do their joint preliminary damage assessment for individual assistance for earthquakes. There's a slightly different protocol than what they use for floods or fires. So they may, the expectation is they're going to need to get into people's homes. For that, we would like to have a representative from the Muni along for those teams. But the staffing costs for the gathering the information for the IA DAC or for the IA damages, there's not really a provision for reimbursement for that. It's a little different for PA, but part of the reason it's a little different is the way that we do our disaster declarations. Many other states don't participate in the 25% cost share. The state of Alaska does. The state of Alaska pays the cost share. And with the federal reimbursements for grants for disasters, there are direct costs and indirect costs. So FEMA looks at those costs that the local jurisdiction would have in developing this information as an indirect cost. FEMA has an allowance for that on the federal side. The state does not pass that indirect along to the individual applicants because the state is paying the 25%. So on the FEMA side, on a federal disaster, the work that goes into the joint PDA development would normally be looked at as an indirect cost, and then in that way the jurisdiction could ask for reimbursement. But because the state of Alaska pays the 25% cost share, the state retains it.
Great, thank you.
Mr. Dyson, did you have a question?
If I could just make one more clarifying comment on the preliminary damage assessment so there's no confusion. It's preliminary only. It's just to gauge impact. We're not going to look at every house and every damaged facility. And the second is the schedule we've laid out is in the incident action plan, but it could vary. We've had aftershocks. We could move to response mode. So it's our best estimate of time for delivery at this point, but circumstances may change the schedule, and I just want to have that proviso in there. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Dyson, do you have a question?
Yeah, thank you. You may have said this, but on the PA, will private utility companies be able to be reimbursed for their repair costs?
For utility companies, if it's a private entity strictly.
For profit.
The private nonprofit types, Chugach Electric has been an applicant in the past, so the private nonprofit type power companies can be eligible applicants.
Yeah,
But if it was strictly private, no.
Yeah, so I was thinking particularly of NSTAR, our gas supply. and they wouldn't be reimbursed if they'd had damage they had to repair?
If it's a private for-profit company, then it's not eligible under public assistance.
I think you just said yes. Thank you.
I'm sorry?
Yeah, thank you.
So, okay, good. Any other questions from my colleagues? Are there anyone from the public who wants to ask a question? Okay, please come down to if you guys could queue up in front of this microphone. This is so that it's broadcast TV. Could you, hey, I lived in Igiugig.
Hey.
How's it going, Jody? Could you state your name for the record? And yeah, please ask your question.
Yes, my name is Ayu Kasatak, Ayyu Qassataq. I live in West Anchorage. And I had several clarifying questions to make sure that I understand what was shared today. Thank you very much for this presentation. It has helped a lot. I wanted to clarify that I heard that the max combined total of state and federal IA assistance is about $34,000. Is that correct? Okay.
So if you guys could vocalize your answers for the people at home.
It could be.
Okay.
Up to that amount.
So my homeowner's insurance, I do have the earthquake endorsement, but my deductibles are 20%, and so $45,000 for damages, $9,000 for living expenses, and so that puts me around $54,000 in deductibles. So in that case, would I be able to stack up the state and federal IA because it wouldn't duplicate toward deductibles?
In order to answer specific application questions will be very difficult. I will tell you that in your application, when you indicate that information, that will all be reviewed and verified, and after that verification, then a final number will be arrived at, that will be discussed with you, and you'll have a chance to see how that is calculated and a chance to challenge it if you don't think it's right. But to get into individual applications, I think we can sit here and say things, but until we review the entire application, we can't really make a decision.
So I'll tell you from the federal standpoint, the federal individual assistance program, whatever that gap is above the state individual assistance program, we don't typically associate that with the deductible. The state's program could be used as a deductible. If Small Business Association grants or small business association loans were asked for as a component of this, those small loans, those small interest loans could be used for your deductible paid over time.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. 2 quick follow-ups. A structural engineer from AWWU came to my home yesterday and told me it is unsafe to live in, and so I have moved out. Does the $17,000 IA include any costs associated with the temporary housing, or is it separate?
So the state temporary housing program is separate from IFG, the individual family grant process. Just another little piece, if we get an SBA declaration, then the state program will require that folks apply to SBA first. It's just, it works the same on the federal side. So folks will be directed to make that application, go through SBA. If there is a gap in what SBA, in the loan that SBA could do and the total number of damages, then you could come back to the state IA program and come back into that program for the difference. So that's an important piece because the SBA is a really, really good resource. The other part is on just for insurance. Generally speaking, neither the state program or the federal program can be duplicated by any kind of insurance. So obviously, if there is an insurance component, then applicants will need to go through their insurance first. We have heard some folks saying they're getting letters from their insurance company saying that they are not eligible, and they haven't actually put in a claim yet. So Our opinion of that is that the insurance companies are trying to be helpful, because generally speaking, if you have insurance, you're going to have to make a claim with insurance and then get a claim denial from the insurance company before you can do anything else. So it could be that the insurance companies are trying to speed that up and just send out these denial letters so that folks don't have to then turn around and request them and slow down their other applications for assistance.
Okay.
Oh, I'm
thank
sorry.
you.
The temp housing, you mentioned temp housing. Thank you, Mike. Our individual assistance program includes two components, the temporary housing and the individual family grant. Those are separate programs. The up to $17,450 does not include anything on the temporary housing side.
Okay.
That program can run up to 18 months from the date of the declaration, and our staff help develop housing plans with those folks that are in that program to try to work them through that as soon as possible. But it's up to 18 months of temporary housing.
Okay, excellent. I heard you say, this is my final thing. I heard you say that you're prioritizing homes that were severely damaged and unlivable. Since I applied for the IA program through the state, my situation has changed. And how do I go back into the system to move that up?
So the best way to do that is to call in on the hotline and tell them that you have your name and address and tell them you have an application in, but something has changed. You need to update your application.
Oh, I'm sorry. I looked away for a second and you disappeared. I also want to inject, based on that question, I know you might already know this, but for perhaps people that don't, you mentioned there's the temp housing and the other two state programs. Do you apply for all of those at ready.alaska.gov, or is there a separate place where you apply for those other two programs?
The application for temporary housing is separate. There are questions on the individual assistance application that's online that prompt questions about housing.
Okay.
And if an individual indicates that their housing is unlivable, then our staff will ask additional questions from the information on the application and prompt that other application process for temporary housing.
So the gateway to that is still ready.alaska.gov, or is there another? Okay.
Nope, that's the gateway.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead, Austin.
Hi, sorry to belabor this, but I'm confused. So I thought initially you said that the state funding that could be available, depending on the need, was up to 17, and that the total was 35. Then I thought you corrected that to say, actually, the state is 17, federal is 35, you can combine them. But then in response okay. So if you can just really, really succinctly state, what is the total for the state, what's the total for the feds, and can you use that money toward an earthquake insurance deductible? Just real short, I think that would be helpful.
So the maximum grant under IFG for the state program is $17,450. It can be used toward a deductible for earthquake insurance. The federal total is $34,900, but it cannot be used to meet a deductible for earthquake insurance.
Thank you so much. And just a quick follow-up. I think sounds like there's a lot of acronyms, a lot of different programs, state, federal, local. People are confused. Do you all have just a real simple chart that you could share with the public that says, for this type of relief, this is what's available, this is the website you go to, this is the process, and this is how you do it? Because it just seems really hard to follow it all if you're new to this. So even if you don't have that, would you consider maybe just making one? I mean, it could be a pretty simple little document.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. O'Hare. Thank you, Ms. Quinn-Davidson. Yes, that you will do it, or yes, that you have it already?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Yes. If we don't have it, Mr. Chairman, it will be absolutely available, readily available.
Okay.
Great.
I believe there's some great information that the state's provided to explain that. If it needs to be clear, we can all make it clear. Sure.
And is that at ready.alaska.gov, or is there another place?
The acronyms that typically on our documents, the full name is first, followed in parentheses by the acronym, and that's in all our documentation that's online.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Quinn-Davidson. Let's return to the public, if you would. State your name for the record.
Josiah Smith. I live in the Jewel Lake area. I did apply online for the application. Then I tried calling repeatedly, and it kept getting to a messenger. And I left a message because I wanted to update the information like she will. So when will I get a call back?
So I have a staff of 12, and we have augmented that with several other people in the office. We are running through those voice messages as quickly as we can. I will tell you that initially our mailbox had the capacity of 100 messages. We upped that to 900. As of last night, we had about 300 messages that were backlogged, and we're working through those as we speak. The surge was pretty early. We bumped up to about 1,800 applications by yesterday evening, but overnight and this morning it had slowed down considerably. We have contractors that are coming in to help us, and we have other augmentees coming in, so that process will speed up very quickly. But you will get a call. If you left a message, you will get a call back.
All right. And also, the same thing for the email then, because I didn't get a confirmation email saying it's been submitted?
If you come see me when we're finished here, I'll take your name and email, and I'll follow up from here to make sure that I can answer you about your application.
Okay. And thank you, everybody here.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Can I ask a quick follow-up from that? In general, this application at ready.alaska.gov, when you complete it, does it send a confirmation email?
Yes. It's technology. It's supposed to send a confirmation. If someone did not get a confirmation, then I would ask that you make a phone call in on the hotline just to make sure that the application is in there.
If you're a member of the public that's here and they've submitted an application, could you raise your hand? If you did not receive a confirmation email, could you raise your hand? Okay, so it looks like your system is not sending confirmation email.
Okay, so let me clarify my answer. It's not a separate confirmation email. It comes up on the application process and says your application has been confirmed. So it's not a separate email, but when you hit submit, when you're finished with the application, it's supposed to tell you get a confirmation message from that application. So it's not like 5 minutes later you get a confirmation email. It's part of the application process itself.
Mike, I'm going to put that as an AAR bullet. Send confirmation emails once we're through all this. Please, sir.
Okay. Dean Cannon. I live in the Jewel Lake area, District 22. It's great to see Ms. Quinn Davidson here. Thank you very much. And thank you all for being here. This is like a one-stop shop. I really appreciate having some questions answered. I did have 2, maybe 3 questions. The first one regards federal. What would trigger a federal individual declaration, essentially? So what hasn't happened yet that would need to happen in order for that to be declared?
Yeah, thanks for the question. I appreciate it. And I want to reiterate that the federal program is not turned on right now. It is dependent upon the damage assessments from the local communities in the states and their submittal to the federal government. So based upon, again, the basic criteria of the number of major homes with major damage and the widespreadness, if you will, amongst the area, the economic wherewithal of the community, and several other criteria. The actual request from the state should articulate all of that, not just the municipality of Anchorage, but also the Mat-Su Borough, the Kenai Peninsula Borough, all of those areas affected, because it is a statewide declaration. And then the federal government considers all of those asks and articulations and nuances in the request and runs through the process from there. But it does go all the way to the White House for approval. And
is there a time frame? Like if this doesn't happen within 30 days, 60, et cetera, or?
So an extension can be made, but it's based upon the factors of access to the data, and we're already cranking the data right now, but getting the state's application in on time, but extensions have been made and granted.
So that filling out that municipality damage form is pretty important, it seems like, in order to get that through to the feds.
Get it done quickly. Take pictures. You've heard the thing. Take pictures. Document your losses, and fill out the application to the state. The sooner that's put in, the sooner the state can assess the widespreadness of those affected, majorly affected, and they can submit their request to the federal government from there.
And as my last follow-up on this particular question again, is there a day value as far as when that window is open for the president to declare disaster?
No,
Okay.
there isn't.
All right.
There isn't. So by the time
Data-based.
the request comes in, is there a turnaround time, you mean, for the federal government?
Or is there a period within which that data has to be submitted and it's...
To the federal government, there's a Sam, what's the window?
For us, our program,
Yeah.
excuse me,
Request for
our program, the deadline for application for the state
Yeah, 30
is
days.
January the 29th.
Thanks. So it's 30 days, the state has 30 days from the start of the disaster to put it in.
The end of the event period.
Thank you. 30 days from the end of the event period.
Which would be
To
29
request
January?
for federal assistance. We have asked, the state is in the process of requesting an extension to that 30-day deadline to request for federal assistance, and that can go up to 60 days afterwards, but that's up to the federal government to determine how much of that period of time they give us afterwards.
I see. So
We do have a very good and communicative relationship. I want to assure you all that we do. We've got a great relationship. We understand that based upon certain criteria, things may take some time. Weather changes, additional damages for aftershocks and those things, some additions to the application may be in place. We absolutely like to get things in on time because it affects everybody else, and we'll do it as fast as we can.
All right, thanks for that. Second question, not quite sure who to direct it to necessarily, but in our circle, in Theseus Circle, there's 14 homes, and 12 of them had severe damage. The same exact thing happened to all of them. They all sunk, and it just seems beyond coincidence. In a perfect semicircle, bam, 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 the same thing happened. So we're all applying for individual assistance, but this happened Sand Lake, District 22, and are we better off as a group? Something happened to us collectively in the circle, essentially. So I'm wondering what we can do as neighbors in the neighborhood. We're all trying to get our individual applications in. Some have, and some are ongoing. But it's just, we're just kind of, 12 families all kind of distraught, like right next to each other. Like what should we do as a group?
Well, for the folks that are running the individual assistance program, is there like a neighborhood program, or is it all individual home-based?
No, I completely understand the question and completely understand the concern. That would be that would get my attention. But the state program, the state individual assistance program, is individual only. So that would be more of a local jurisdictional maybe initiative or awareness thing to take up with your representatives, or depending on the age of the homes. If it was a very recent development, then it might be something that the developer could help with. But for the individual assistance program, it's an individual application program, individual piece.
Mr. Croft?
You can be
My name is Dean Cannon, DeanCannon.
if there's something different about that area. So I'd love you to send both Austin and me, as easy to find on the pictures, description, sort of what you said here, but if you can get it in writing, it's easier for us to forward it to people and say, what is this? Is this typical? Is this something different? Is there something about this area? We're all trying to figure out.
Okay. And who should I send that to?
Those are your two assembly members for that district.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, it does seem kind of right in our area. There's a few people. I mean, we all got yellow stickered, Yeah. So, but all right.
It doesn't seem like a coincidence. It's something.
It isn't.
Yeah. This is where the sand volcanoes happened, or the.
Yeah, that's the term. Yeah, that's the term actually. Yeah.
Yeah. I actually work with one of your neighbors. Told me about this too, so it's something that's definitely on our radar. I'm trying to think if there's any particular municipal agency that would be a good point of contact for you. I think the best thing would be to reach out to your 2 assembly members, and then they can coordinate. Mr. Schutte there in the back, Chris Schutte, he is the head of the Community Economic Development Division, or Department, rather. If you want to talk to him, he might be another person to speak with as well.
All right. All right, thank you all again for being here and for putting this on. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Good luck with your applications.
Good afternoon. My name is Rebecca Barker. I am the Community Resource Coordinator here at the library. My role is to help connect people to available community resources, so I'm glad you're here and I'm glad I'm here. My question is, we've talked a lot about homeowners and what they can expect and hope for. My question is, what about folks who don't own their homes? Can you shed some light on your experience with folks who've lost essential personal property, either as renters or as folks without an address or community members who experience homelessness?
So there is a renters part of the IA application. Those folks have the ability to ask for assistance for losses to essential personal property. The rental property itself, the landlord, presumably it's a business, so that would fall out of the IA part. But one piece of the IA thing for renters is, for instance, if a rental owner displaces a renter because their primary residence has been damaged, and so they want to evict a renter and move into the rental property, then that renter that has been displaced can also apply for assistance.
That temporary housing? Is that what you're saying for that particular
They can. It's a little different for renters. For homeowners, it's up to 18 months. For renters, it's up to 3 months. It's 90 days. But they can apply for assistance if they've been displaced.
Okay.
In that nature. Otherwise, it's limited to personal property.
Okay. And so when it comes to folks who experience homelessness, if they've lost essential personal property, do you have any experience of any disbursement that's happened with those circumstances, or is that kind of a not so usual thing?
Mr. Chairman, if I could take that on. We're up here with government. Beyond the government programs, we have a mass care group in our state EOC, as well as the municipal level. So there's a number of, and frankly, the majority of recovery that happens in the state of Alaska every time we have a disaster is from non-governmental agencies, from faith-based and volunteer organizations. The government can only do so much, and frankly, we're not very nimble. Mm-hmm. The faith-based organizations and non-government organizations are very nimble, can execute very, very quickly. We see that in this disaster as well. At the municipal level, you have a number of organizations, the Red Cross, Salvation Army. At the state level, we have a group that oversees all that, is supporting that. I would recommend that folks without that access things like the 211 United Way, Salvation Army, Red Cross, the other facilities that are, for example, the feeding and nutrition program that normally goes on when schools are open was unable to be executed because schools were closed. In cooperation with the municipality, the Mat-Su Borough, and the Kenai Peninsula Borough, the State Department of Education executed the nutritional feeding program for children 18 and under while the schools were closed. So those kind of programs are going. That's a cooperation of government, but there's a lot of things out there that are social service type agencies that aren't related to these specific government recovery programs.
Well, thank you for that clarification. I'm glad that you're aware of all those awesome resources. So just to clarify, the individual assistance grant would not be appropriate for somebody without a current address. Is that clear? Is that right?
The statute indicates it's for primary residence.
Okay. Thank you. Gotcha. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Hi, Deshanna York. I'm with the University with Cooperative Extension Service. I talked to a couple of you prior, but I had a couple follow-ups. So when we talked about timelines, you all talked about timeline for state assistance and then sort of this, timeline for what the federal piece would be with the possible extension. One other component is we have it was the 29th, right? January? Was that the?
That's correct.
Right.
That's just an application.
Right, application. So once that ends, barring no other events, et cetera, is there a timeline from there that runs out, or is it when you get done with all the reviews?
The timeline for processing the individual family grant, we will do as quickly as possible. We're trying to get checks to people as quick as we can.
I just meant, does it end, or is it end when you're done going through all of the assessments and processing everything, whether payout or not? You stay open on that process until everything is reviewed, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so it doesn't close at any given time until you're done with all of those?
We are going to review every single application individually, and we will address the needs as the program allows. So there's no end to that.
So I'm not sure that I'm completely understanding the question. So let me tell you how it works, and you tell me if I answer the question. Typically, for the individual assistant, the state individual assistance application period runs 60 days.
Right, got that.
So people can apply during that 60 days. If we see a need to extend that period, then I'll make a recommendation to our director, and we can extend that period. The only other time limit that is involved in the state IA program are the time limits for temporary housing, which can be up to 18 months from the declaration, or for homeowners, or 3 months for renters.
Okay.
Those are the only time limits that are associated with that.
Okay. And then, Director Sutton, you mentioned there was going to be some, in collaboration, or some FEMA disaster team folks coming. I haven't heard anybody mention if we know yet, or roughly how many of those folks would be coming. It was next week, correct? To help with assessments. So roughly, what are y'all thinking on number of teams?
Individual assistance assessments.
Yes.
Is that the question?
Yes.
There's two different programs.
Sorry, the assessments that are being done in collaboration, yes. The team that's coming up.
So we have it. We have an initial team in place. Lisa Davidson, who just came up and talked, is a team lead. She is world renowned, and that's right, you are. And she's bringing additional teams. This should be day after tomorrow, or day after tomorrow. And we're working with the state to work those assessments out.
I was just curious about how many people that is.
15. About 15 people.
Okay. And then on the applications, I think I know the answer to this, but just to clarify, for folks who would need assistance with applications, folks with disabilities, et cetera, so with Cooperative Extension, we're working with the public on a regular basis. Is there anything in place on the state side, because we're not into the federal yet, that assists with folks who have needs for filling out the application?
Sure, that's what the phone number, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Sam, that's what the phone number. Please call us with those kind of things, and we'll assist, individually in order to make that happen. If, you don't have a computer and don't have access to the internet, those kind of issues, yes, that's what the phone number is for. So.
Okay. I didn't know, because likely we would get questions, and, there may be a request for us to help with people, so I was just curious. And then my last question really has to do with the comment you made about ongoing aftershocks, et cetera. Everybody's tensions are high. And so as we go through this process, we're ongoing, we have some deadlines. We would assume, which is bad to do, but assuming that timelines will move depending on what happens. Hopefully, we're all hopeful we'll have no other major event, but if we do, maybe in very short, do we just continue this process and then we're just communicated with as we go? What happens if there is another major event?
Your answer is correct. We would switch to response phase again and delay this a bit, but the programs would go forward.
Okay.
And I just want to make one, I know I've said this before, but if I may, clarification on Monday. What is happening is a preliminary damage assessment is scheduled. That is not taking applications from people. That is not writing any checks. That is for us to gauge, and the Federal Emergency Management Agency to gauge the impact of the disaster. Likewise, on December 17th, the public assistance is to gauge the impact of the disaster to the public infrastructure and eligible nonprofits. So still no applications taking, still no checks being written at that point. I just want the expectations to be clear.
No, thank you. Appreciate it.
And again, in a typical disaster, those things would happen prior to the governor declaring. But the governor declared the day of the disaster in this case. So this paperwork and these teams are following up in order to activate federal programs.
Thank you, Governor Walker. Please continue.
Hi, Mac Lethenstrom, Lethenstrom. Just a question. If we're already working with private contractors for major structural repairs on our primary residence, do we need to halt that work until a state assessor can come out to assess the damages, or can we rely on photos, videos, invoices, receipts for expected or possible reimbursements?
It's a great
Right,
question.
so that's a very good question, and what we try to push out to the public as much as possible is don't stop. Don't wait on the government.
Okay.
Do what you're doing, get your assessment, do whatever it is you would do if the government was involved. Just keep
Okay.
your receipts, take pictures, and all that information will be part of your application package.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Would any other members of the public like to ask a question? So we were noticed in two different places. We were noticed to 115 and 145 in some of our releases, but we are officially noticed to 145, so we can go until 145.
First, I've got a question if you got time.
Yeah, Mr. Trainee?
What's the tax implication of getting federal earthquake assistance? You have to incur that in your income tax or what?
So what's the tax implication of these programs?
If I understand the question correctly, is if you get assistance money from the state or the feds, is there a tax implication to that? Is that the correct question?
That's what I'd like to know. Thank you.
Okay, our past experience, this is Sam Walton with State of Alaska. Our past experience is that those payouts from the federal government and the state government for disaster assistance have no tax implication, no tax responsibility.
This is Mike O'Hare from the federal government. That is correct. I'll concur with that.
Which makes sense because you're just being made whole. You're not increasing your income, in theory. Mr. Dyson, you have a question?
Yes. If we're at a point where we can move beyond talking on the assistance question.
Sure. I mean, I don't see any other questions from the public. I think we might want to come back to that. I mean, that is the program that I'm certainly most interested in. But yeah, go ahead, Mr. Dyson.
And it's not the one I'm most interested in. But for FEMA, Mike, Mr. O'Hara, do you know what capacity the military has for construction work, rebuilding roads or bridges or whatever?
The Department of Defense is a great partner for assisting the states to help with those emergency repairs. And as we all know, some of those emergency repairs could be permanent repairs. If the need was required and requested from the state DOT, then we have every opportunity to bring in the DOD to help.
Yeah, so I must have asked, do you know what is available at Fort Rich?
There's plenty of equipment, sir. It's finding those soldiers and airmen that can operate, and they have quite a presence there, sir, as I understand.
Yeah, the military generally has
Yes, sir.
lots of capacity
They've got
for
great
civil work.
engineers and CDL, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes,
Do you
sir.
have the procedures in mind with
Yes,
a
sir.
phone call?
We do, and as you know, the State Emergency Operations Center is on base.
Yeah, I got it.
Yeah,
All right.
and we're connected. We're dialed in on a
Got it.
construction plan. Yes, sir.
All right. And you, I think, brought up a seminal question. If we had lost all of the telephone stuff, communications capacity, what are we capable of doing, and what should we be preparing for the future?
Yes, sir. So, Mike O'Hare, thank you for the question. If we did lose communications, the federal government, in response to the state of Alaska, has plans and protocols in place based upon a magnitude of an event to deploy and employ capabilities from the federal government. We will, if we do not hear from the government, they have no communications or cannot make a phone call out, we have plans in place to deploy and employ certain and a lot of federal assets to get onto military installations, assessing with the understanding that they're open and available, to stand ready to support the state and within 24 hours. And we have those requests from the state of what they might be looking for. Sorry.
Yes. So my concern is, what do we do with 300,000 people who have no way of communicating? They can listen to whatever radio stations might have backup on their car radio, but what else?
Yes, sir. So I would commend the amateur radio network that we have here in the state of Alaska. The state of Alaska has ham operators embedded in their emergency operations centers. They use them in their continuity of operations plan, so if they can't, and Mike, I'm sorry I'm jumping on this, but correct me if I'm wrong, but we do talk and plan this and drill this on several occasions, that the state can go to their continuity of operations sites with tactical comms, satellite communications, to make those requests out to communicate with each other, as well as communicate with my team and I. Mike?
If I could, the primary method for first responders and the state emergency managers to communicate if other forms go down, and it's a day-to-day method also, is the Alaska Land Mobile Radio is a trunked radio system that's deployed largely throughout the road systems here in Alaska and also other places in Southeast. Very, very capable system. It interoperates with the AWARN system here in Anchorage, and that would be one of the best backup mechanisms if all our phone, internet, etc. went down. The state also has a mobile emergency operations center with phone capability in it. It has over-the-horizon communication capabilities to communicate back to the lower 48 via satellite data systems.
All right. So
there's lots of
I'm not surprised. Methods. I'm not talking about government talking to government. I'm talking about the people knowing. And my guess is the ham radio population has continued to decrease, at least as a percentage of the general population, and would be a relatively limited asset.
Mr. Chairman, I would, and this is a rare occasion, I would disagree with you.
Good.
There's an uptick in the use of ham radio licenses, trainings, and operations.
Good.
They will be the call. They will be the communications of last resort, the effective communications of last resort, sir.
And do we know who those people are? And are they somewhat strategically located?
Yes, sir. So the local communities do have ham operating networks. The state is aware of those ham operating networks and know their frequencies. They have ham communication systems and individuals in place to connect with them, either it be at their continuity sites or in the EOC themselves. And we at the federal government also have ham amateur radio operators on our teams to make those connections.
Yeah, if I may continue, Mike Sutton, the history of the land mobile radio system is interesting, but those the devices are very expensive, and my guess is there's not as many of them around as we should. What's your sense of that?
The Alaska Land Mobile Radio is one of the backbones of first responder communications, just as AWARN is here in the municipality. We routinely, as a jurisdiction will upgrade to a newer bunch of radios. Those older radios we take and reprogram for folks that don't yet have them. So we're always expanding the use and the number of radios that are out there. Am I hitting?
Yeah. And the last I knew, they were like 5,000 a piece or something. And maybe as we follow up on this in a month, maybe you could recommend if there's, if us in this city should have more. And as I remember, that system was supposed to be able to communicate with aviation, all emergency response, with the Coast Guard, and so on. Is that still true?
We are just a user of the Alaska Land Mobile Radio System. The Department of Public Safety and the Department of Administration, I think, actually, if you will, own that program and know where the funding, et cetera, comes for ALMR. It is an expensive system, agreed, but it's a very capable system also. And it is built to federal specifications for interoperability that come with a price tag because of that. So,
yeah, so we'll follow up on that with our public safety people and so on. May I continue?
Yes, although I would like to get back to if there's any members of the public who have questions to ask. But yeah, if you have a
so this is I'm sorry there's nobody here for DOT, but State Mike Sutton, it looks to me the highway failures that we've had are largely the sloughing away of the material aggregate under the road. And certainly the Mirror Lake one, probably the International Airport Road, Minnesota intersection, and it looks like maybe on the Glen Highway there. Do you anticipate a DOT looking at their standards for those and some analysis of what we could do better on those road beds?
That's a great question, sir. I am neither DOT nor a soils engineer nor a geologist, but having done a little bit of planning in this area, I can say that every earthquake is going to be different depending on where the shaking is, the frequency of the shaking, the depth of the earthquake has very different effects on different soils in different places. So a deeper or shallower earthquake could have affected other parts of the road system completely different, and the failures that we're seeing now would have weathered it just fine. Again, not speaking from expertise, but a lot of planning as we have addressed these types of things. As we looked at the 64 earthquake, and if you look at the things that were damaged and where that is different than the damage.
I got it.
Okay.
Does your organization make a recommendation based on the failures we've seen at the end of all the analysis?
No, sir.
Okay. And just for general information, this earthquake, because it was located and how the fault zones are laid out, the waves, shock waves, went from west to east. And the roads that had north-south orientation were subject to more of that wave action from the in the overburden. And that ought to be, obviously, a part of reevaluating the structures.
Just as a point of clarification, we had a representative from the USGS, United States Geological Survey, Dr. Peter Heusler, was in the SEOC again the day of, and he explained the nature of the earthquake was not on a fault line, but it was in fact a very deep, as the two plates, the Pacific Plate and the Alaska Plate, and the Pacific Plate is subducting. It was a piece of that 34 miles deep that broke off because of the pressure. So it wasn't a fault like the Castle Mountain fault or the Border Ranges fault that actually activated.
Yeah, and that's helpful to know. It seems to me that it ought to be a part of your department's responsibility to make recommendations, when we see a pattern of failures. I'm not criticizing you at all. It's not your mission as was charged, but it is our responsibility here within our jurisdiction to look at those things. And we probably will.
Sure, that's where building codes and zoning restrictions on what to put in certain areas would certainly come into play.
Yeah, but I'm talking about public infrastructure, particularly roads. Just as an aside, the guy from the railroad was here, and he, like the police, decided that we weren't going to be questioning them very much. But I ask, and this is something I talked to you about, Federal Mike Sutton, and that's the capacity of the railroads to marshal their resources if we need to do it. And they had they were backing up operating within, I think, 25, 30 hours. But he said they could marshal all the freight cars and flatbeds they needed if we needed to bring supplies in Seward or Whittier, which was good to know. That's all the questions I had, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Dyson. Mr. Peterson, you had a question?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And it's not so much a question as sort of a statement than a question. We had the gentleman here that was talking about, a dozen houses in his neighborhood being damaged, all in the same event. So, and you recommended that they all had to go and apply online individually. But would it be possible to have someone go out to that neighborhood to assess the damage and do them all at once instead of going back and forth? Is it possible to organize that effectively to maybe help some of these neighborhoods like this out? Because there might be isolated neighborhoods where they had significantly more damage than we had in general, so to speak, overall of the muni.
So as those joint PDAs are arranged, certainly the idea, just because it would be naturally advantageous to hit the areas that are the hardest affected, our planning would be if we can identify that those, and we do this by address, so we'll see them show up, side by side by address. We would try to arrange those assessments in such a way that if we're in that area, we're looking at everything that needs to be looked at in that area. The difference, just a little compounder on that, is on the federal side. I mentioned earlier that the assessment that deals with earthquakes is a little different protocol than a windshield tour. So certainly, as those folks are contacted, we would try to schedule around what works best for them. So if everybody can be there at the same time, then certainly that would be great. But those assessments that involve getting into somebody's house will be scheduled individually.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson.
If I might add to that?
Yes, go ahead.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Sutton.
That's a great question, sir, and that's the reason that we depend on working with the Muni very closely to understand where those neighborhoods are. We would like to take that damage assessment team with the limited number of people and the limited time that they have to see those kind of impacts. So we'll be working closely with the Muni to determine where those are and have them point them out to us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Okay, are there any other members of the public who'd like to ask a question? Do you have a question, Mr. Haberman? Yes, it's number 5 on our agenda. There is an audience participation portion.
Mr. Chairman, do you have a client for one more question from the Assembly member?
Yeah, we have 15 more minutes. Go ahead, Mr. Traney.
I'd like to know from the feds, we have a lot of deferred maintenance both for MOA and for the city. Do you guys discount the deferred maintenance that we didn't take care of when you look at the overall effect of the earthquake as we apply for federal assistance? Does that come into factor at all in it?
Thank you for the question. This is Mike O'Hare. If maintenance has been deferred and it has been exacerbated the problem, that is taken into consideration. Yeah, absolutely. It is part of the factors.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Traney. A good question, although kind of asked the quiet part loud. Okay.
The school district had a lot of deferred maintenance. They didn't have the money to take care of a lot of it. I just wanted, you got to figure out what the effect of deferred maintenance was on the impact of the earthquake hitting the school district as hard as it did.
Yeah, well, good for expectation management, certainly. Would anyone else like to ask a question? Okay. Yes, sir. Would you come to the microphone again? Yeah, we have enough time. If you were a member of the public who asked a question and you'd like to ask another, that's fine. We have time.
It's just one that I forgot to ask earlier. Was there any other neighborhood that had a similar situation to us that you know of, where there was 12 adjacent houses that suffered exactly the same damage? Does anybody know?
Mr. Falsey, so the question was, there was a circle near Sand Lake, a cul-de-sac, where about 12 adjacent houses were damaged. Do you know of any other places in the municipality that had that kind of concentrated damage?
Through the chair, no, not really, and that's what's going to make this somewhat challenging. The initial damage assessment is in some ways designed just to let us deploy the roving band of inspectors, and so we'll certainly be sending them in your direction. I think, in fact, we've already sent our structural engineers out there to take a quick look at the soil conditions now. But it's going to be a challenge because after we do your circle, we'll be everywhere. There is no one neighborhood to go to. There is not one subdivision that was set on fire. There is not one area in Eagle River that had catastrophic land failures. So it's going to be a challenge to get this roving team of inspectors to the primary locations, especially considering there is no off-the-shelf roving team of inspectors. We're making this up in real time.
All right. It just sounds like it's a unique situation then.
Yeah, I think, obviously our first priority is to take care of the folks who are at the circle now, but I think there are going to be interesting policy questions going forward about why it happened there. Was it something that the developer did? Was there something was missed by our planners? Why did this cul-de-sac have this issue?
Soil structure, maybe?
Yeah, and did someone get around Title 21 when they subdivided this or whatever it was? There's going to be interesting questions we're going to ask. But in the short term, I think we all are hopeful that y'all can receive some assistance.
All right, thank you all again.
Thank you, Mr. Smith.
Hello again. Second thought about this. I'll be working on the slope, so I won't be home all the time. Do I have to be there present when you guys expect the house?
Good question.
For the state part and for the FEMA part, we would need to make arrangements for access. So, again, we're going to speak after. Yeah. So we'll put something. Normally, those things are done by appointment. So I understand that the folks that are at the slope may be gone for a while. But you're available by phone, so we can make those arrangements. If you're not home, generally you're home or gone for 2 weeks at a time or so?
Depends on.
In the time period that we're going to be doing the assessments, we should be able to accommodate that.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Dyson?
Yeah, just in summary, I anticipate we'll reconvene something like this group in January sometime. And I will, hopefully, I'll be asking you now that to guide us on what we should do to do better in the future, and secondly, be better prepared for the future. And so just be thinking about that. It's kind of an after-action report and critique, and because we want to do better, and it certainly appears like we did extraordinarily well. On my list of things, I think we need to go back and look at the geotechnical stuff, and I suspect we'll find there's a soils issue where this subdivision and so on, and we need to know that. And then certainly the roadbed stability issues, the land mobile radios, we will ask our public safety people and rescue folks, do we need to do more? And I think Mr. Trainey's bringing up the question of deferred maintenance. If there are structural problems in that deferred maintenance, we need to shuffle them up to very high on the priority list. And even yesterday, people in the Hill building were anchoring shelving to the walls and so on and so forth. And there's another issue there that we maybe should be paying attention to. And as I mentioned last night, the school desks people are supposed to shelter under, are they capable of handling it? Suspended ceiling or light fixtures that come down and so on. And for all of my colleagues and anyone else, any other items that come to mind that we ought to be looking back at?
Mr. Dyson, thank you very much, and I look forward to that meeting and discussion of how we can do things better. I would agree we did things great. One of the things that the federal government is looking at in conjunction and collaboration with the state is working with the insurance commissioners in the state on how to get a better product out there that is affordable, that is comprehensive, should it include all hazards, the whole complexity with the claims component of it. So that is one of our partnership initiatives, is also how do we get folks more insured, because the insurance component is truly the resilient component to it. How do we make it easier to get, easier to use, and make it marketable and a good product for the insurance companies as well? There's a big balance we have to talk about, sir.
Yeah, and that's the next. And when I sat in a seat 30 years ago, I put in the municipal code that on real property transfers, if that piece of property is in a avalanche chute or a floodplain, and I don't remember if I put the seismic rating on that, but that's something we probably ought to. And my reasoning is most homeowners are not equipped to even think about analyze that. And so I'll go back and look. Maybe you could do that for me, Mr. Gates, and see if we had the seismic zone on those land deeds there, and that would assist the insurance companies in making their evaluations as well. Hopefully they'll be fair and rational, no redlining. Yeah. Thank you. That's very helpful.
Thank you, Mr. Dyson. Okay, at this time, if there are no further questions from the public, we are going to move to audience participation and then to adjournment. Go ahead, Mr. Haberman. Oh, I don't have my thing. You'll have 3 minutes. But
I got my timer.
Great.
My name is Junior Carl Haberman. I live in the Mountain Center Valley. I follow the public process. The public process done appropriately. Decision made by the governing bodies more like the public interest. First, I would like to compliment those who handle this meeting, a way to reach out to the public of what a very important issue is affecting on the minds of everyone in the community and the state, the aftermath of the earthquake, and providing a video so people who were not here can listen to the information provided. I do recommend that you set up a town hall meeting and not have a situation where the public is hearing from you, but you're hearing from the public. And that frequently does not happen, like on dealing with crime issues. It's been the other way around, and that should be happening, and do it in a way the public can attend, include anyone that's been affected and interested. Now, what I'm about to say is because I've addressed the concerns on the earthquake over 40 years ago. Many of you were not even around in Anchorage, and back in the days of George Sullivan, the municipality of Anchorage. In those days, we knew there were risks. Certain areas were high-risk areas. The place was mapped out. But what happened in this city, and as a resident for the first approximately 20 years of me being in the state, I'm fully aware of what was going on then. The administration after administration had said, you can build in those high-risk areas generally, and we're going to build those buildings, and we hear it as most recently as the aftermath of the earthquake, that, hey, we're successful. We built those buildings to not fail. Well, that did not happen. But I raised an important question then over 40 years ago. The city knew where those high-risk areas were. And I questioned and I raised a concern that you know exactly where the high-risk areas are. By allowing the public to build in high-risk areas does not create a liability to the city where the public can go after the city for knowing and allowing them to build in high-risk areas. By the way, my statement can go, and the words I'm saying now, can reflect to other parts of this country. San Francisco, Los Angeles, other areas where you know where there are high-risk areas, and the public and governments knew for many, many decades. The work was done. We were told about this situation way in advance, but we built in those areas. But now the question is to you all, the question I raised concern over 40 years ago. Doesn't the public have a right to go after the municipality and say, you knew about this, why did you allow to build there? The response by this administration and other administrations is basically a situation, both Republican, Democrats, or whatever party is, we can build safely. Yes, in many respects, we were not affected by it, but many were already affected. But what about the future, and what about the liability, and what about those who can go now after the city for allowing that? And one last piece, and that's what I'll add. Before you allow to rebuild anywhere, you should now address this issue. Do you repay those people with funds from federal, state, local, whatever, and say, okay, it's now okay to rebuild? With what I said to you today is the question you're being addressed, what I said over 40 years ago. You need to address this now before you allow them to rebuild. And if you have knowledge then and now, good luck. But I'll still be here and I'll still raise those issues. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Haberman. So we're going to move to adjourn here pretty soon. I just wanted to say thank you to everyone who came. Thank you to the officials for answering questions. We have some documents here, and I think the key point is this website, ready.alaska.gov, if you are interested in the individual disaster assistance program. If you don't have internet access, you can call 1-855-445-7131, although we've heard today that they have a backlog right now. It's understandable, so it might take a little while to get a call back. Just very briefly, I wanted to say that the earthquake got me thinking a little bit philosophically, as I think a lot of people did. And I've been thinking about the work of a 20th century philosopher named John Rawls. We're all behind that veil of ignorance. We don't know who we're going to be born as, if we're going to have chronic illness, if we're going to be born into a poor family or a wealthy family. In the same way, we don't know when an earthquake or another disaster like this strikes, we don't know if we're going to be one of the ones who has their home destroyed or not. And there are things you can do to mitigate that. You can buy earthquake insurance, you can have building codes, you can try to prepare. But ultimately, that only goes so far. And at times like these, we have to help each other. And we have assistance programs set up for exactly that, that we are our brother's keeper. And I'm hoping that we can make the people of this region whole to the best of our abilities. So thank you all for coming. We're adjourned.